In this video, we will look at how to solve a linear equation when we have fractions involved. So really, what you want to do, or what your first goal should be, is we want to wipe out the fraction. And the way we do that is by first finding a common denominator. Now, if you do find the lowest common denominator, it makes your life a little easier because the numbers will be smaller, but it could just be a common denominator. Now, before we do that, we do have to do one thing, which is if something is not a fraction, make it a fraction by putting that number over 1. So in this first example, 2 was just a whole number, but I put it over 1. And now to find my common denominator, I'm going to look at all the denominators. So 2, 1, and 15. Now, a shortcut to find a common denominator is to just multiply your denominator. So 2 times 1 times 15 is 30. And that is actually also the lowest common denominator. Once we have found this common denominator, we want to turn all of those fractions into something over 30. So if we want to change the denominator, we're going to have to multiply it by something. But whatever I multiply the bottom by, I have to multiply the top by that same number as well. So if I look at 2x over 2, I can turn 2 into 30 by multiplying it by 15. But whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So this is going to become 30x over 30. For the next one, it's over 1. Well, 1 will become 30 if I just multiply it by 30. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 2 times 30 is 60, and 1 times 30 is 30. Then my equal sign. And to turn 15 into 30, I just multiply it by 2, and I'll do the same thing to the top. 4 times 2 is 8. The minute your denominators are the same, we can just cross them out and focus on the numerators, because as long as we make the numerators work in the equation, then we're good. But again, this can only happen once all of your denominators are the same. So now I'm going to rewrite what I have. I have the 30x, I have the plus 60, and equals 8. Now it looks normal. Now it's just a two-step equation. So let's bring the 60 to the other side, changing the sign. And that becomes negative 52. And then we can divide both sides by 30. Now, a lot of times with fractions, we are going to end up with a decimal, like it won't turn into a nice whole number. So if we want the exact value, we can just keep it in fraction form, but in lowest form, which this is not. We do have to simplify it. So both top and bottom can be divided by 2. So I can simplify this further by writing this as negative 26 all over 15. And if I wanted a decimal answer, I'm going to put squiggly equal signs to show that I'm rounding. If you plug that into your calculator, you do end up with approximately negative 1.7. And then that's it. Let's try another one. So in this next example, again, I have a whole number that's not in a fraction form, so I'm going to put it over 1. For this one, right away, my common denominator, if I'm looking at 4 and 1, will just be the 4, which means the first fraction is fine the way it is. But the second one, I just need to turn that 1 into a 4, so I multiply it by 4. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top, so it becomes 8 over 4. Now, the magic show, the denominators cancel out, and we can just focus on x minus 8 equals 8. And this is actually a nice one-step equation. We bring the negative 8 over, and it becomes positive 8. So we get 16. All right, let's try the next. First step, again, the 9 goes over 1. And now let's get a common denominator between 2, 4, and 1. Now you might do the shortcut and say 2 times 4 is 8 and use 8 as your common denominator, which is perfectly fine. You'll still get the same answer at the end, but actually the lowest common denominator is actually 4. And that just saves you a little step, but it's okay, 8 would have worked. So using 4 as your common denominator, why don't you pause the video here and try this out on your own and then come back to check your work. So for your first fraction, to get 4, we're going to multiply top and bottom by 2 to get 2x over 4. The second fraction is fine the way it is. And then to turn 9 over 1, we have to multiply top and bottom by 4. That way all the denominators are 4 and we can cross them out. So now all that you're solving is 2x plus x equals 36. The x's are on the same side, nothing to move around. So we have 3 x's that are equal to 36. And we can just divide both sides by 3 so that we get 12. Okay. Let's add a little bit to the difficulty. So number 4, I have a little bit more going on in the numerator, same with the rest of them really. But again, I still have a constant there, that's 6, which is going to go over 1. This is a very common mistake. Some people forget to put the constants over 1 and they completely ignore it when they're getting a common denominator. But you can't do that, or else it will be wrong. So I'm looking at 3, 5, and 1. If I multiply 3 and 5, I get 15. So let's use 15 as a common denominator. So for the first fraction, I can multiply top and bottom by 5 to get 15 on the bottom. So x times 5 is 5x, 3 times 5 is 15. Now in the next one, we have to multiply top and bottom by 3 because 5 times 3 will give me the 15, but then my numerator has multiple terms in it, and I have to multiply all of those by 3. So the way I'm going to show that is by writing the 3 and then writing my numerator in brackets. Now this is kind of the long way to do it. If you want, you can just multiply both terms by 3. So then I would have 3 times x is 3x, 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Your call, but I'm going to go the longer way because sometimes it is just a little safer in terms of the signs. All right, and the last fraction, I need to multiply top and bottom by 15 to get 15 on the bottom. And then 6 times 15 is 90. Now the denominators match, wipe them out, and rewrite what we have. And now this might be a little more complicated than previous ones because we have brackets, but nothing we haven't seen before. So the minute we get that common denominator, it becomes more familiar, and we can rely on our previous knowledge. So step 1, let's get rid of those brackets. So 3 times x, 3 times negative 2. And now I'm just going to bring the negative 6 over. I could have also collected my like terms right now, but I'll do that next. And notice when I brought the negative 6 over, I was careful and I switched the sign. And now we have 8x's equals 96. And our final step, divide out the 8 from both sides. And I do end up with 12. All right, let's go to the next one. So we have 2 fractions. They both have denominators already. If I'm looking at 4 and 5, 4 times 5 is 20, and 20 is in fact the lowest common denominator as well, so that's nice. And now we're going to multiply our fractions. Now notice that both fractions have 2 terms on top in the numerator, so I do want you to be careful with your brackets. So how about we pause here, think about what you have to multiply your fractions by, and write down that first step, or even go all the way to the end, just to see if you're going to make a mistake, where is it going to be? And then come back to check your work. So your first fraction has to get multiplied by 5, and notice I put brackets around that numerator, and I am going to go the long way and write 5 bracket w minus 1 all over 20. And then the next one is going to get multiplied by 4, and again the long way, 4 bracket w plus 2 all over 20. The 20s are matching, they are gone, and I'll rewrite what I have. Now I do have brackets on both sides, which means I'm going to do two distributions, 5 times w, 5 times -1, and then 4 times w, and 4 times 2. And now we have the variables on opposite sides, so I do have to do that double swap. So the 4w goes to the left, the -5 goes to the right. Switching signs, so the 4w became negative, and the -5 became positive. And here, 5 minus 4 is 1, so we're done isolating, and 8 plus 5 is 13. So there we are. Now, if you think there are places where you're going to make a mistake, or you saw you made a mistake when you paused the video, star it, make a note of it so you don't make that mistake in the future. And let's go on to our last two. So for number 6, we have 3 fractions and then 1 single term. I'm going to put it over 1 so I don't do something silly. And now I'm going to look at all of my denominators. I have 3, 9, 3, and the 1. Now, technically, if I were going to do a multiplication shortcut, I wouldn't multiply the 3 2 times because that's just going to make my number unnecessarily larger. So I would just do 3 times 9 and use 27, and that would be an okay common denominator. But I do know that 3 goes into 9, so using a common denominator of a 9 is just going to be a little quicker. So for my first fraction, we multiply top and bottom by 3, because 3 times 3 is 9 on the bottom, and then the top just becomes 3x. The second fraction is fine the way it is, because we chose 9 as the common denominator. And then for the x over 1, well, I have to multiply top and bottom by 9, because 1 times 9 is 9, and on top I'll have 9x. And now for the last one, there's something here that I want to highlight, and that is that we have subtraction here. You have to be very careful. So the 3, it's going to have to get multiplied by 3, and so will the numerator. But this time, if you were to do that shortcut of, well, I'm just going to multiply the 2 terms in the numerator by the 3 and be on my way, that would actually be a mistake, because we do have the negative outside the fraction, and the negative has to get distributed within. So here, going the long way and writing these brackets will actually save you, because the minute I cancel these out, that negative will be attached to the 3, and that's what we're going to distribute in. So I have 3x subtract 2 equals 9x subtract 3 bracket x plus 8. And if you do it this way, there's no way you should miss that -3 as a whole being distributed in. So 3x minus 2 equals 9x minus 3x minus 24 when I do -3 times 8. And now I'm going to clean up a little bit before I swap. So 9x minus 3x is 6x. And now I'll do my double swap. So 3x minus 6x equals -24 plus 2. That's -3x's and -22. And we'll have to divide both sides by that -3. Now, if I wrote my answer in exact form, the double negatives would cancel out to get positive 22 over 3. But if I went to my calculator and I rounded, it's positive 7.3. And the answer you present is really just going to depend on what is asked from you in the question. All right, last one. Why don't you pause the video here and try this on your own so you can really see where you make mistakes, if you make any. So go ahead and pause and then come back to check your work. So your common denominator, 5 times 6 is 30. So your first fraction gets multiplied by 6. So we're going to have 6 bracket y minus 5 all over 30, so mission accomplished. You could have also distributed the 6 into the numerator and wrote 6y minus 30 right away. For the second one, I'm going to multiply by 5 because 6 times 5 is 30. So 5 bracket y plus 3, but if you went the shortcut way, you could have written 5y plus 15. But you know, if you do that and you make a mistake, don't do the shortcut way, or else you're always going to make the mistake. Now the denominators match, they're gone. I write what I have, and this should be familiar. So a little distribution, being careful with your signs and your multiplication. So 6y minus 6 times 5, which is 30, and then 5y plus 5 times 3, which is 15. And now a quick double swap and we will be done, because when we bring the 5y over, it becomes negative, the 30 becomes positive, and then 6 minus 5 is 1. So we've isolated for y, and 15 plus 30 is 45. So there's our answer. And then that's it. And I haven't done any left side, right side checks, but I can definitely do one quickly on my calculator just to be safe. So I'll show you what I would be plugging in. So the left side is y minus 5 over 5. So 45 minus 5 all over 5. So that's what I'm going to do. 45 minus 5, that's 40. When I divide by 5, I get 8. On the right side, I have y plus 3. So instead of y, 45 plus 3 all over 6. So 45 plus 3 is 48. When I divide it by 6, I get 8. So I'm happy. You know, the fraction ones are where you have the most potential to make silly mistakes. So doing the left side, right side check could save you. And I didn't show much work. I mainly just did it in my calculator, but it can be helpful and save you a little bit. So that's it for fractions. Get that common denominator. And again, to find the common denominator, you can just do the shortcut of multiplying your denominators. And then when you're multiplying all of your fractions, make sure you multiply top and bottom by the same thing to get that end goal common denominator. And then it's back to basics.